Hello everyone, we're going to be reading the write-up for Deneb Algedi II plus Jupiter. This is one of Sphere and Sundry's most popular series. You'll be able to see why in just a few minutes. I just want to show you some of their offerings here. Very, very beautiful materia as usual, but very powerful and really useful, especially nowadays, as you'll see. So this is Deneb Algedi II, conjunct Jupiter. I wake and brace as a torrent of ocean spray hits the upper deck. The salty taste of the briny deeps, its coolness and stick running across the chapped face of a lifelong sailor. Each wave that crashes against the bow sends deep shivers through the wooden bones of our aged vessel. A haunted creak accompanies each rise and fall of the ship, and I thank the Lord she's steady and true. For her watertight walls are all that keeps our gold and rifles and souls, wretched they may be, from a grave at the bottom of the deep blue sea. The power we've gathered to discuss here today is not considered a very bright or important star, yet governs our matters of life and death, prosperity and poverty, safety and vulnerability. The dream last night took place in the middle of the ocean, sometimes stormy, sometimes still. I was shown Deneb Algedi's representative, the sea goat, and came to understand what a ridiculously nonsensical, impractical chimera that truly is. Fish tail, worthless on land. Air-breathing lungs, sticks for legs, and dense-ass cloven hooves, liabilities at sea. As that sunk in, my consciousness merged with that of the poem's sailor, and the sea goat itself morphed into an allegory for the relationship between vessels and seafarers, making all of Deneb Algedi's mishmash of significations, its associations with the violent storms, impenetrable borders, wealth and theft, death and discipline, as well as the favour of kings, clear as daybreak upon the horizon. Hulls, boat shells, are some of the highest stakes borders known to humankind, especially to the ancients before the advent of nuclear power. The difference between a nigh impenetrable hull and a weak one could very well be a death sentence for all aboard, treasures and commodities included. Since the humans on boats were typically tasked with the location or transportation of such valuable goods, often for the sake of the monarchs or governments they served, the ability to protect one's booty was almost as paramount as not sinking. Regarding recent ruminations on the relationship between Saturnian and Venusian principles, fun fact that the term copper-bottomed is a nautical expression suggesting that something is very stable or very safe, a term still used in today's financial circles. Likewise, ships were always governed by a single captain, or king by another name, because it does not behoove anyone to squabble over what the plan should be if pirates start tailgating or for chaotic disorganization to break out in the event of a sudden storm. Testifying to the star's patriarchal nature, these were, with very few exceptions, always men, and the vast majority of seafarers for a living typically have been, as their lifestyle essentially married them to their life-sustaining vessels, and the ocean in general. Throughout history, sailors have often been characterized as competent yet grizzled, hard workers with bad attitudes and questionable hygiene. Goats, anyone, who also enjoyed copious drink, a la fish. Though one imagines goat captains must have been relatively mature, reliable, and somewhat stoic, trustworthy enough to lead expensive expeditions and make life-or-death decisions for all within the borders of these tiny floating kingdoms. A man others would respect and therefore follow to distant shore or watery grave. Through this lens, Deneb Algedi's power to batten up borders, seek and safeguard treasure, expect order, prevent theft, loss, death, and issue lawful edicts, falls perfectly into one coherent context, one that has plenty of terrestrial applications. For at the end of the day, fancy allegories and dream travels aside, Deneb Algedi is straightforward, no nonsense, and reliable. It brings protection, decency, and the consolidation of wealth, especially through prudence and responsible tending, but also via magical survey, magnetism. It prevents theft and nuisance through unparalleled boundary reinforcement and evokes responsible, mature behavior in the wearer, as well as those who meet its sobering, judicious influence, making it exceptionally useful for things like managing bad neighbors, messy roommates, meddlesome family, misbehaved wee ones, irritating co-workers, bosses and management, false friends, envious competition, and the untoward, but unfortunately all too common, like. Deneb Algedi runs a tight ship, necessary for navigating life's stormy seas. It is the ancient rock face enduring unending winds and pounding waves since time immemorial. The walled citadel that keeps the people safe and castle that preserves the king's coffers. For there is no way to be of this world without coming across the seedier elements of mother or human nature, personal and systemic threats to our well-being and interests, which bring harm at one point or another. It is through the wise erection and tending of rock-solid boundaries that exposure to such external forces can be monitored, neutralized, and kept at bay, allowing for the preservation and safekeeping of all within its, in our case, very literally charmed, confines. On an exterior level, that means application of Deneb Algedi is ideally suited to reinforce the energetics of barriers that contain the self and sphere, the thresholds, the locks, the property lines, the keys, the wallet, the safe and the mailbox, the computer, the modem, and of course the cell phone. On one's person, it limits others' ability to access, influence, or cause harm, making it ideal for ongoing support against things like magic throne and the evil eye, but also interpersonal and energetic entanglements, restoring sovereignty and the promotion of wise decision-making via independent, uncoerced operation, all of which are vital to staying out of trouble and thriving, as plenty of misfortune and suffering are brought upon ourselves through a combination of trauma, immaturity, emotionality, and lack of self-control. And as such, Deneb Algedi safeguards not only against external factors having little to do with us, where we are true victims, but of transgressions and harms against the self and one's wider world, where we are all sometimes, intentionally or accidentally, the perpetrators. Deneb Algedi protects against psychic intrusion and wards vulnerabilities ranging from nightmares to spiritual or physical attacks and psychological disturbances, all of which can happen any time, really, but are especially important to guard against during times of increased susceptibility, while asleep, during illness or weakness, following traumatic events, and when threat levels are high for whatever the reason, such as being at sea. 360 degrees, 24/7, 365.25 days, monitoring against inner and outer threats. Sign me up. Note that upon initial or fresh encounters with Deneb Algedi energy, security threats are often brought to one's attention, akin to how algol can trigger electrical disturbances while settling in. These can include fraud alerts, broken locks, gates that won't close, phishing scams, attempted password breaches, and the like, but in my experience, personal and observed, have always resulted in successful intervention by governing authorities, the bank itself, for instance, and the ultimate prevention of loss or harm. Increasing energetic security sometimes triggers individuals and the outside world to fuck around and find out, testing the integrity of newly shifted borders. Upon discovering that won't get them far or anywhere, self-seeking and predatory energy redirects itself to less secure, lower-hanging fruit, leaving well-defended targets to their peaceful prosper. The description of the first Deneb Algedi series had its virtues, and I do recommend reading it, but it showcased police as one of its potential agents and debuted shortly before cop stock in the US was brought to an all-time low, following fresh, high-profile instances of deadly abuse of power, racism, egotism, corruption, and cronyism brought to blinding light on the world's stage. Shortly thereafter, Americans' long-time distrust of law enforcement bubbled over in the names of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the many others who've met untimely deaths at the hands of corrupt and undeserving human officers. And the Black Lives Matter movement dominated the streets and headlines of the otherwise locked down spring and summer of 2020. Because Deneb Algedi offers protection, but is also associated with law enforcement, people, understandably, had a difficult time passing their relationship to this star and its arcana. Would it be safe to have it on if one were attending a protest? Is it a good idea for vulnerable populations to wear Deneb Algedi on their person or keep it in their car? Would it increase rates of being pulled over, and if so, what type of treatment would result? Is it okay to break silly laws, or if you aren't exactly Mother Teresa, a Deneb Algedi native, by the way? While I had faith in the guiding principles of Deneb Algedi, that it has to do with the spirit of what is right and good, and that any crooked person literally cannot be an ordained representative of what it believes in, enforces, or how it operates, I could not at the time answer such vital inquiries with absolute certainty. Experience is the ultimate teacher at the end of the day. All else is conjecture. Thus, it is a tremendous relief to share here that after 2+ years of Deneb Algedi being used by hundreds of clients through dangerous times, that not one person has reported an adverse officer-related event, meaning no people at all. On the contrary, clients have relayed having better experiences than they'd had before, when those interactions came up, and healing around issues having to do with authority and the justice system. It has helped win court cases and seen charges reduced or dropped, and been a powerful guardian for those who have turned to it for aid, for Deneb Algedi is not a penal power. It is a rehabilitative, stabilizing, mature, boundaried, and responsible power. You know, the things governing bodies and justice systems are theoretically set up for. The protective spirit of Deneb Algedi does not only extend to those already in possession of the most protection society has to offer. It is, as stated in its write-up, privilege in a bottle, dutifully protecting all who apply it. While it does notably increase officers' presence, seeing more police cars than usual, it has not resulted in an increase of actually being pulled over, ticketed, or arrested, and has brought out the best in the character and quality of interactions which have manifested. Perhaps it draws the good ones, or the spirit of Deneb Algedi simply overtakes its satellites via proximity to the influence. Studies have indicated that, generally speaking, increased police presence lowers rates of criminality, burglary and murder, because actual criminals tend to move those activities away from well-patrolled areas. There are still lots of issues with all this that obviously cannot be resolved by me or further discussion here. Given, however, that its influence has not, to my present knowledge, resulted in reported arrests or negative interactions, it is safe to suggest that it is likely an appropriate and tremendously protective power for vulnerable populations to have on hand. Likewise, tempering our own reactions to the presence of authority figures and working our way into at least a tenuously comfortable, improved relationship with the idea of them improves the likelihood interactions will go well, should they occur, given that nervousness and discomfort, no matter how appropriate, registers as weakness, which draws predatory natures to the surface. Let us remember that most laws, at the end of the day, literally exist in order to keep people and society safe. Don't steal, don't murder, don't rape. Generally speaking, great rules of thumb. Individuals have law-given rights, which authorities are quite literally there to defend. The task their vehicles typically quote being to protect and to serve. It's only through human pervasion, bias, and a combination of personal and systemic weakness these become corrupted, and Deneb Algedi looks upon them with judgment and disapproval, as does the bulk of society. Let us also note that anti-discrimination laws have become key aspects to the modern books. That corruption exists cannot keep us from good faith engagement with what is right, just, and prudent. From striving for personal and collective accountability, which is the true solve for the issue of corrupt anyone or anything. May we all be forces for such in our daily lives and reap the rewards of Deneb Algedi as a natural consequence. Resources, protection, and the favor of those in power. Reinforcement, wisdom, and the restoration of divine order, as Deneb Algedi seems to invoke the higher nature of its living satellites. We should also note that judges, bosses, and people in decision-making positions of all sorts fall under its sway. Akin to how police presence lowers criminality. Rather than being afraid of what these figures represent and the power they hold over their citizenry, Deneb Algedi's presence reminds all involved that their roles exist to benefit the people, that they are responsibilities which should be carried out with integrity, maturity, fairness, and good faith. Donning it encourages people in positions of authority to grant us extra consideration and due respect, and extends us the benefit of the doubt, should we err, as we all sometimes do. Deneb Algedi helps cultivate and call forth Sky Grandpa's mature, non-competitive, socially oriented masculine virtues, which, as discussed in Jupiter's Imperial Vantage and Mars in Scorpio write-ups, are open source qualities anyone, anywhere on the gender spectrum is free and wise to cultivate, as they are archetypes unrelated to nethers and identity. This power, like most Sphere and Sundry chooses to offer, is useful for self-development, adulting, and the building of a good, stable, and well-resourced life. It supports a Stoic's worldview which promotes accountability, while simultaneously offering stalwart support to and high expectations of the individual. Every individual. Before someone asks, it gets asked all the time, Deneb Algedi doesn't much care that you jaywalk or break dumb rules. It cares if you bring harm to yourself and others, and provides gentle yet meaningful course correction to enable a more judiciously executed, responsible, and well-organized life. It brings order where there is chaos, and clarity where there is confusion, and the boundary reinforcement necessary for the safekeeping and stability of all you hold dear. Those boundaries, in addition to demarcating physical thresholds, are also energetic, psychic, and emotional. It keeps people out of your business, and you out of theirs. It is excellent to use on yourself and also magically, or physically, apply to those who transgress the lines you have, misbehave, or cause a nuisance. Jupiter's presence conjunct Luna and Deneb Algedi in this election only brings more beneficence and wisdom, increasing the girth of its stellar potency and providing additional insulation, protection, and wealth-generating abilities. Deneb Algedi is considered to have a similar nature to Saturn and Jupiter already, so both classical outers being co-present only serve to reinforce its original inclinations. Such a configuration is only possible for Jupiter during brief periods every 12 years, and both together every 60, and that's if talismanic grade elections are otherwise available. Mercury also relates to this star and trines our core configuration from its own conjunction to the fixed star Speaker. If people want to cultivate Saturnian-style virtues without the heaviness and harsher edge, Deneb Algedi will get you pretty damn close. It plays well with most of the other series and is neutral to cooling, constitutionally speaking, though I do recommend pairing it with other benefic and self-fortifying materia or taking breaks to focus on those things as well. All work and no play make Jack a judgmental boy. It can also be helpful to orient application of Deneb Algedi to exterior items and objects, and take breaks from application to the self and skin. Anointing a piece of jewelry or clothing is very effective and limits internalization of Deneb Algedian perspectives that can lead to feeling down on oneself for being less than perfect. The goal is to build ourselves up, not become suppressed or crippled by self-judgment. For all these reasons, start slow. Monitor the building of its influence. It can be used almost daily and is difficult to overdose on, used for thresholds and warding. But I must say, during this launch cycle, I did manage to do it. A Deneb Algedi hangover includes being unhelpfully in touch with people's shortcomings and character flaws, your own and others. But at the same time, Sky Grandpa ain't mad, he's disappointed. It hurts when figures we're subjected to find us lacking, and when those in positions of leadership and authority, for whatever reason, are unworthy of our respect, and that thar's a key. Supplement with other materia, powers, and practices accordingly. The Saturnian King subset emphasizes Jupiter's role in the election, incorporating additional Jupiterian materia, including the bark of 4 mighty oaks, ritually harvested in the day and hour of Jupiter as he held court in his home sign of the Fishes, alongside protective mistletoe, citrine, 24-karat gold, saffron, and more. Many will recognize the Saturnian King title from the Orphic hymn to Jove, which seemed perfectly descriptive of Jupiter's power under Deneb Algedi's influence, co-present with Saturnian in his own sign. Its energy is more anticipatory, invigorating, uplifting, expansive, yang, and straight golden than the base series, but emphasizes more the wealth accumulation and moral wisdom than protection, primarily. Both are fantastic. We thank Kaitlin Coppock for providing all of Sphere and Sundry's elections and are honored to welcome back longtime collaborators Elizabeth Barriel and Mr. Anthony Mack. This is the first time we're offering a Plus member-only pre-launch prior to this series' public debut, which will be the norm for all the future brings. You are welcome to join or cancel with a click anytime. The community remains a free and welcoming space for all clients who would enjoy connecting with myself and our fellow seafarers. To learn even more about this star, the first series write-up has additional information. You can also read reviews from those who have used it over the last couple of years and check out the Deneb Algedi sphere of our private client platform. A link to join can be found in any shipping confirmation email. The purpose of life is not to be happy, it is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. Ralph Waldo Emerson.